Hey, this is Bill. Welcome back to the channel. Here is a genuinely wild and slightly crazy question for you today. What if we drained the entire Mediterranean Sea completely dry and then pumped every single last drop of it into the Sahara Desert? Picture giant pipes, bigger than any ever built, blasting seawater into the sand. It sounds absolutely insane, but people have seriously proposed ideas just like this. The dream was to turn the world's biggest desert green and full of life, and to create huge amounts of brand new land where the sea used to be. So could we actually do it, and what would really happen if we did? Grab a seat, because the real answer is far stranger than you think. Let's start by looking at exactly what we are dealing with here. First, let's meet the Mediterranean Sea, sitting between Europe and Africa. It is an enormous sea, covering about 2.5 million square kilometers. And on average, it is about 1.5 kilometers deep. That holds a truly mind-boggling, almost unimaginable amount of water. Roughly 3.7 million cubic kilometers of salty seawater. Now let's meet its giant neighbor to the south, the mighty Sahara Desert. The Sahara is the largest hot desert on the entire planet. It covers about 9 million square kilometers of endless sand and rock. That is actually bigger than the whole United States put together. So the desert is actually much larger than the sea itself. Which brings us straight to our first big and very tricky problem. And that problem is a very simple one. It is gravity. Water, as you already know, always wants to flow downhill. But most of the Sahara Desert is actually above the level of the sea. That means the sand is sitting higher up than the sea is. So the water would never ever simply flow there on its own. To move it there, you would have to pump the water uphill. And not just a little bit of water, but an entire enormous sea. This would need the biggest pumps ever built in all of history, and pipelines wider than buildings, stretching on for thousands of miles. It would take more energy than entire countries use in many years, just to push that whole ocean of water up into the high desert. But let's just say that somehow we actually managed to do it. The very first giant change would be to the Mediterranean itself. As we drain it away, the sea level would drop lower and lower. Famous coastal cities would suddenly find themselves far from the water. Beautiful beach towns would be left stranded in the dried-up mud. Busy ports and harbors would be left completely high and dry. Ships would be stuck, sitting uselessly on the cracked ground. Islands would slowly grow taller as the water shrank away from them. Some islands would even join together into brand new stretches of land. And beneath the vanished waves, a hidden world would be revealed. Ancient shipwrecks and lost ruins would finally see sunlight again. But it would also be an absolute disaster for all the ocean life. Countless fish, dolphins, and sea creatures would lose their only home. And as the very last of the water vanished, something would be left behind. A vast, blinding white desert made entirely of salt, because whenever seawater dries up, the salt always stays behind. Now let's follow all that water to its strange new home in the Sahara. Remember, most of the desert is far too high for the water to stay. But the Sahara does hide a few secret spots that are below sea level. These are giant natural dips in the land called depressions. One of the biggest is the famous Qatara Depression in Egypt. It sits over 100 meters below the level of the sea. If we poured our water in, it would collect there and slowly fill up. Slowly but surely, a brand new inland sea would be born in the desert. Sunlight would sparkle on shining water where there was only sand. It would be one of the strangest sights on the entire planet. A giant blue sea, right in the middle of the golden Sahara. But the water would only ever fill up these very low depressions. The rest of the towering, endless desert would stay completely bone dry. So we would not get one giant sea, but just a few scattered lakes. Still, even these new seas would begin to change the world around them. All that water would slowly begin to evaporate under the blazing sun. And evaporating water rises up to form big, fluffy clouds in the sky. Those clouds could then bring rain to a land that almost never sees any. Parts of the bone-dry desert might slowly start to turn green. New plants, farms, and even small forests could take root and grow. It really sounds like a beautiful dream finally come true, doesn't it? But nature is never ever quite that simple or that kind to us. Changing the weather in just one place changes it absolutely everywhere. Rain that now falls on the new sea is rain that was stolen from elsewhere. Distant lands that once depended on that rain could slowly dry right out. Weather patterns across the whole entire globe could be thrown into chaos. A gift for one single region could become a curse for many others. So greening the Sahara might quietly harm the rest of the whole world. And please do not forget about all of that leftover salt. As the new desert seas evaporate, they too leave their salt behind. Over time, they could become far, far too salty for anything to live in, turning our beautiful blue dream into a dead, lifeless, salty puddle. Now here's the most amazing part of this entire strange story. Something almost exactly like this has actually happened before, for real. About 6 million years ago, the Mediterranean Sea truly dried right up. Its narrow connection to the huge Atlantic Ocean was slowly cut off, and with no new water coming in, the entire sea evaporated away. It left behind a deep, dry, and incredibly salty valley of death. Scientists actually call this event the Messinian Salinity Crisis. Later on, the Atlantic Ocean finally broke back through the barrier, refilling the whole sea in a colossal flood of rushing water. A flood so powerful, it may have refilled the sea in only a couple of years. People really did dream up giant projects like this in the past. One famous idea, called Atlantropa, planned to dam the sea near Spain. The goal was to lower the Mediterranean and reclaim vast new land, and to generate enormous amounts of electricity from that giant dam. But the side effects would have been an absolute, total catastrophe. Drowned lands, ruined cities, dead seas, and completely broken weather. So the honest answer is that we almost certainly never ever should. Draining a whole sea to fill a desert creates far more problems than it solves. The Mediterranean and the Sahara are honestly both perfect just as they are. One is a cradle of life and history, the other a wild, beautiful sea of sand. So sometimes the very smartest thing we can do is simply leave nature alone, because our planet usually knows exactly what it is already doing. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a new one. This has been Bill. See you in the next video.